their body back to a healthier place after kind of a prolonged restricted diet. I I guess I'm not a big fan in that context. When I think of reverse dieting, the idea of gradually and incrementally increasing your food mass in small amounts, to me, I think the more appropriate context for that is if you're already eating at a level that pretty much keeps your body composition at equilibrium and you're looking to put a little bit of muscle mass on or possibly try and lose a little bit of body fat and gain a little bit of muscle mass at the same time, I could see the idea of reverse dieting. And you would start small. You would add maybe 10 to 20 grams of protein, add a comparable amount of fat to whatever you're already eating, and then see how your body responds. Um, to me, I think one of the more appropriate contexts for reverse dieting is to try and put some actual mass on your frame, but do so in a way without getting fat. It's kind of a cleaner way to quote unquote bulk, although I hate the bulking mindset within bodybuilding. What do you think about it then?
Yeah. I'm thinking the same thing, really. Obviously, as you know, it would be determined on how low someone's food intake was. So if someone, for example, went from a diet of an off-season diet of 200 protein, 200 carbs, 100 fat, whatever it happened to be, down to 200 protein, 0 carbs, 20 fat, or something really ridiculous, yeah, they're going to have to scale it up slowly. Otherwise, they won't be able to digest the foods that they've omitted for all that time. There's definitely a tolerance that they might lose over time, especially if they're cutting out all the carbs and plants and stuff. In terms of should you do it, I think the goal for it is to get your body back to equilibrium. Like Jerome rightly said, you want to build muscle in that time if possible. It's a good time to build muscle. Your body's more receptive to the nutrients that you're putting in because it wants to store it basically. So lots of different hormones will be at play here.
Mhm.
What I'm kind of thinking is that the aim should be to get back to baseline in terms of the off-season food intake amount as quickly as possible. However, the caveat to that is you have to do it in a safe manner. So you're not eating to the point where you're just gaining weight for the sake of scale weight. It's relatively lean, good weight. It's to get your hormones back to normal. It's to provide nutrition to your body so it can recover properly from your workouts. So when you train in the gym, for example, you're not training when you're flat all the time. You're training when you've got a bit of a pump. That's one of the sort of goals of reverse dieting in a sense. Like I said, this is with the caveat that you're not increasing your body weight massively. At least from my research of about 5 or 6 different studies I've read from people that have been chronically under eating, and then they've had to find a way out of that sort of state when their basic metabolic rate is very slow. Their body's just not churning out much, energy from the amount of food that they're putting in. What I'd want them to do is get back to baseline as quickly as possible. So, for example, if they are eating 200 protein, 0 carbs, 20 fats, something bizarre like that, like Jerome said, up the fats 10, 20 grams, up the whatever else. Protein will usually probably stay the same in a lot of cases. Depends what kind of strategy someone's deployed to lower their body fat. I know a lot of people will incrementally increase their protein intake as a result of getting leaner and leaner. It's meant to be more muscle sparing, but you obviously err on the side of having too much gluconeogenesis from the production of glucose from protein as a substrate.
Mhm.
There's always that risk there as well, which could effectively be detrimental to your health, could impact your digestive system, could be, or will be, glycating, at least when the blood glucose is too high. You might not feel great. You'll have hunger cues all messed up. So yeah, there's definitely an incremental approach that has to be followed. So ways that you might look at your own body to identify if reverse dieting is going well for you or not is that you're getting a steady increase in your body weight and you're making slow, steady progress in your gym sessions.
Mhm.
Another thing you could look at if you're particularly health conscious, like a lot of people seem to be, or hopefully are, is you'll measure your blood pressure, your fasting blood glucose, things like that. resting heart rate, your general mood and disposition. Yeah, the aim should be to do this over a quick period of time. And like I was alluding to earlier, the 5 or 6 studies I've read on increasing energy intake after a chronic depletion phase, so to speak, is that your metabolic rate will regulate itself back to its normal state within about 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks. So people out there promoting 16-week reverse diets, I can't really get behind them. I think it is a way to sell more programs, keep people on that tether, just a few more weeks, I think that's, we're bodybuilders. We want to get back in the gym and perform as well as possible, as quickly as possible. We're not going to be doing that if we're spending 16 weeks gradually titrating back to normal. We've lost effectively 2 months of progress there, quite easily. So that's kind of my standpoint on it.
Yep.
I don't know if you agree or disagree. I mean, you're welcome to disagree.
Yeah. So a couple of points. When somebody is in a prolonged, I'm just going to say mass deficit, because I know people tend to use dieting and reverse dieting in terms of calories. But if somebody is in a really, really heavy mass deficit diet to try and get that last little bit of fat off right before a show, a really slight reverse diet is still going to keep them in a fairly significant mass deficit. So somebody might be incrementally adding food back into their diet, but they're probably going to feel like trash for at least the first couple of weeks after a competition, because their energy is still really, really low. When I think of conventional reverse dieting, from what I've read, usually the recommendations are about 150 to 250 so-called food calories above what you're eating at that time. And then you follow that for a number of weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks, see how your body responds, and then add maybe another 150 to 200 so-called calories. If I understand you correctly, it sounds like you would probably increase the mass perhaps a little bit quicker to try and get them back to a more equilibrium diet, which is probably going to more closely approximate where they started their contest diet in the first place. Although you don't want to fully rush to that point, right? So would you probably do something between between protein and fat, maybe 30 to 50 grams total. And I know there's a lot that goes into that, depending on how they diet it down, but you're adding probably a little bit more food every single week than conventional reverse dieting. And I think I would go that route too. I know too many people will end a contest and they'll get right back into whatever their baseline diet was from the onset. And like you mentioned, that can be problematic too. So I would try and increment it probably over about a month. However big that gap is between where they started and where they ultimately finished their contest prep or that mass deficit, I would try and ramp that up over probably 4 to 6 weeks and just try and make it fairly even every single week. But that's a pretty significant amount of food every single week. How do you have you had to reverse diet people before in this kind of post-contest state, or how do you normally deal with it?
The way I deal with it is mostly through scale weight and subjective measures. Of course, you're looking at health markers as well if someone would provide them. In my case, for example, my current body weight is around 109 kilos. I compete on stage in shredded condition in somewhere around 98 kilos, so about 11 kilos over contest weight. So it's roughly 22 pounds, something like that. Now, I'm thinking, okay, if I've spent 8 to maybe even sometimes 12 weeks dieting, it's about let's say for instance, take about a kilo a week. That's 2 pounds a week. What you notice in that time is that the first week, especially if you're coming from a primed phase during the off season when you're well fed, you'll lose 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 pounds. So that first week it does count, but it almost doesn't count in a sense.
Right.
So immediately post show, the person will gain about, just assuming they're eating a bit more. I say a bit more, I mean like maybe 10% on top of what they're already eating. That's not a guideline, it's just a hypothetical.
Sure.
Then what they might notice in that given week is that they'll gain about 4 or 5 pounds back, as they would have lost it in the first week of dieting itself. So already you're looking at 15, 16, 17 pounds to gain back. I think a safe weight gain without too much detriment for a large athlete like myself might be 2 to 3 pounds per week. So say you're looking at, say, 6 pounds in the first week. Let's say, for instance, I don't know, 2-3 kilos. That's 3 kilos plus about 7 more. It's about 8 weeks. Now, the other problem with that is how far was someone depleted when they went into the contest phase? And when I compete, I have to compete very depleted to get that dry look. I'm not someone that can really eat into a show and do these 700-gram carb ups and refeeds. I can't do that. I'm one of those people. I just have to eat very little and just maintain my diet throughout as close as possible. That's the ideal situation for myself. So yeah, I mean, you're looking at maybe 8 weeks. That's for a big athlete.
Yeah.
So a smaller athlete might be 6 weeks. Then, of course, whilst you're doing that, you're also decreasing the amount of output that you're doing. So, if, for example, you're trying to eke out all the results you can, lose more fat in the last, say, 3-4 weeks of a diet phase. Say you just want to get the last bit of fat off your glutes, you got shredded glutes sort of thing. You might then decrease the food a bit and add in a bit of extra activity. So for me, it's walking the dog. Or rather than cycling to the gym slowly, I'd cycle to the gym a bit faster. It's more intense kind of workout.
Yeah.
If I was walking the dog for half an hour, it might be 40 minutes. For, add in 5-10 minutes each week or something like that. So then I'd do the same approach as with the diet as I would with the actual training itself. So if I'm training 5-6 days a week, just split up my volume just so I can see what I can do in 45 minutes in the gym versus an hour in the gym 4 times per week. That's my way of kind of managing my output. Also with the gym itself, I feel like if you can go to the gym a bit more sometimes, especially when you're close towards the actual end of the contest, the dieting phase, I think that can always be a distraction from wanting to eat more food and the hunger and the appetite and all this sort of thing. Because, you're sort of counting down the days till you compete. So everything has to be incremental. So I'm not saying to people, go straight back to your diet and straight back to your off-season training plan in terms of like cardio if people do it or training. It has to be incremental both ways.
Yep.
Does that explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And it just made me think that, and I've never coached someone who's been in that state where we've had to really kind of gradually reintroduce food, or I've never coached somebody past a contest date, but it makes me think that maybe a lot of contest prep coaches probably should do some kind of coaching for at least the first month after a show to make sure that people aren't going right back to terrible habits or binge eating, because it's very, very, very common for competitors to spend all of that time and discipline and energy getting contest ready, and then the show's over and all of a sudden it's kind of this like, well, what the hell do I do now? And people would be shocked at how much weight a lot of competitors will put on within the first week after a show. 15, 20 pounds, very easy. A lot of people will on a Saturday contest have shredded abs, and you can see striations in every muscle group. And then by the middle of next week, they won't even have abs. So, and that's so unhealthy for you that it makes me think, as coaches, we should probably extend that duration of our coaching for quite some time after a contest too.
Yeah, there's definitely a health phase which I know pro bodybuilders follow. So this is a bit of an insider tip, you might call it. So pro bodybuilders are typically on different substances for about 9 months of the year, then off for about 3 months. The time they're off is usually, say it was the Olympia, it'd be the 3 months after that. So they'd have Christmas off, time just before and a bit after the New Year. In that time, they just eat, get the body back to equilibrium, but they wouldn't be eating to gain weight. It's more of a sense of getting your body back to normal, repairing your joints and things. But we got to consider is they're already at a high level of muscle mass. So they're not trying to eke out every month of building it that they can. They want to be fresh and ready for the next show if they're doing one show per year. Whereas the average sort of bodybuilder is trying to build muscle continuously throughout the whole year. So that's kind of where I stand in terms of like time on, time off and that sort of thing.
Excellent.
Yeah, very good. Very good.